Some doors only close so the right one can finally open. Nobody in Redwood Creek could explain why people were lining up before sunrise outside a bakery that had been abandoned for almost 9 years. The old brick building on Maple Avenue used to have broken windows, faded paint, and a rusted wooden sign that barely held together through California winters and hot summers. Now the smell of fresh sourdough drifted across the sidewalk before 6 every morning, pulling strangers off the street and convincing them to wait patiently with empty hands and growing curiosity. Food critics had written about it. Local television stations had filmed it. Investors had started calling. But the owner refused every interview. He arrived before dawn, unlocked the front door himself, switched on the lights one by one, and started kneading dough long before the first customer appeared. His name was Nathan Brooks, 36 years old, a quiet single father. He never rushed. He never raised his voice. Every loaf that left the oven passed through his own hands first. 7-year-old Lily Brooks sat on a wooden stool near the front window every morning with a coloring book open across her lap and a small blue backpack resting beside her feet. She greeted every customer with the same bright smile before returning to her drawings, occasionally looking toward the kitchen, where her father worked without saying much. Their routine never changed. Neither did the line outside. At exactly 8:14 that Tuesday morning, a black luxury SUV stopped in front of the bakery. The driver stepped out first. Then a woman wearing an ivory business suit climbed onto the sidewalk, shielding her eyes from the California sun as she studied the modest storefront. Claire Whitmore had spent the last 4 days trying to buy this bakery after hearing that its waiting list stretched nearly 3 months for wholesale orders. She expected an aging baker or a retired family business. She did not expect silence to greet her the moment she stepped through the front door. The warm scent of butter and fresh bread filled the room. Customers paused in the middle of conversations. Nathan lifted a tray of golden artisan loaves from the stone oven and slowly turned around. Claire froze before either of them spoke a single word. 3 months earlier, she had personally signed the paperwork that ended his career. Now the man she had dismissed without hesitation owned the one business everyone in Northern California suddenly wanted. Nathan simply nodded once and placed the bread onto the cooling rack. Lily looked up from her drawing, smiled politely at the visitor, and said, "Dad, is she here for bread too?" 3 months earlier, Whitmore Foods still looked untouchable from the outside. Its headquarters overlooked the San Francisco Bay through 40-foot glass walls. Its test kitchens operated around the clock, and its products filled grocery shelves from San Diego to Sacramento. Employees called it one of the safest places to build a career in the food industry. Nathan Brooks had believed that too. Every weekday began exactly the same. At 5:15 in the morning he parked his aging pickup behind the production building, carried a lunch box that Lily had decorated with colorful stickers years earlier, and walked through the employee entrance before sunrise. He was the production development manager, the person responsible for improving recipes, reducing waste, and making sure every loaf leaving the factory tasted exactly the way customers expected. He rarely attended executive meetings. He preferred the bakery floor, where flour covered his work boots by 7 o'clock and fresh bread filled the air, instead of corporate presentations. At 4 every afternoon he left no matter how busy the day became. Lily finished school at 4:30, and she always waited with her backpack outside the community center 2 blocks from their apartment. Nathan had made himself one promise after losing his wife 4 years earlier. His daughter would never wonder whether her father was coming. That promise mattered more than promotions, bonuses, or titles. Claire Whitmore had only been chief executive officer for 18 days. At 32, she had inherited the family company after her father retired unexpectedly because of health concerns. Investors questioned whether she was ready. The board watched every decision she made. She responded the only way she knew how. Faster meetings, higher standards, immediate accountability. Every department received surprise inspections during her first month. Every manager was expected to prove results instead of relying on reputation. Claire respected numbers more than stories. On the second Tuesday of her leadership, she announced an unplanned inspection of the production facility. Supervisors rushed through the building, straightening workstations and checking schedules. Nathan barely noticed. He was focused on testing a revised, sourdough fermentation process that had taken almost 6 months to perfect. A timer beeped beside the industrial oven. Steam escaped as he opened the heavy door and carefully examined the first finished loaf. He smiled quietly to himself. The texture was exactly what he had hoped for. Behind him, polished dress shoes stopped on the concrete floor. Someone had entered the bakery without making a sound. Nathan had not turned around yet. Neither of them realized that the next few minutes would permanently change both of their lives. Claire Whitmore stopped beside the stainless steel preparation table and watched without introducing herself. Around her, department directors hurried to explain production schedules, inventory reports, and quarterly goals, each one hoping to make a favorable impression on the new chief executive officer. Claire barely acknowledged them. Her attention stayed on the man removing another loaf from the oven with steady hands and placing it beside the first one. She checked the employee roster on the tablet her assistant carried. Nathan Brooks, Production Development Manager. 12 years with the company. Strong performance reviews. Almost no executive visibility. She frowned slightly. Nathan finally turned, saw the group standing behind him, and offered a polite smile. "Good morning." Claire did not return it. Instead, she glanced at the cooling rack, then at the digital production board mounted on the wall. The next commercial batch was already running behind schedule by 9 minutes. "Why is the line delayed?" she asked. A supervisor opened his mouth to answer, but Nathan spoke first. "I paused the schedule to finish testing a revised fermentation cycle. It improves texture and extends shelf life naturally." Claire looked at the production numbers again. "Was this approved?" Nathan answered honestly. "The proposal was submitted 3 weeks ago. I am still waiting for final authorization." Silence settled across the room. Several managers lowered their eyes. Claire interpreted the situation immediately. An employee had changed the production schedule without executive approval during her second week as chief executive officer. The pressure she had carried since accepting the position suddenly narrowed into one decision. She believed leadership meant acting without hesitation. "Rules exist for everyone," she said evenly. "If managers ignore procedures, everyone else will believe they can do the same." Nathan remained calm. "I understand your concern." The test was nearly complete. The results would have been ready this afternoon. Claire interrupted before he could continue. "That is not the point. Company policy is the point." Her assistant quietly prepared the termination paperwork on a tablet, while the surrounding supervisors stood perfectly still. No one defended Nathan. No one explained that almost every successful bread line in the building had started as one of his experiments. No one mentioned that he had saved the company millions of dollars over the past decade by improving production efficiency. Those facts remained locked inside filing cabinets and forgotten reports. Claire signed the authorization with one smooth movement. "Your employment ends today, effective immediately. Security will deactivate your building access within the hour." Nathan looked at the unfinished loaf resting on the cooling rack. Then he removed his apron, folded it carefully, and placed it on the stainless steel table. "Thank you for the opportunity," he said quietly. He picked up the lunch box covered with Lily's colorful stickers and walked toward the exit without another word. As the door closed behind him, the timer beside the oven sounded once more. announcing that the final loaf from his unfinished recipe was ready. The afternoon sun was already dropping behind the hills when Nathan parked outside the community center exactly on time. Lily spotted the familiar pickup through the front window, waved to her teacher, and hurried outside with her blue backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She climbed into the passenger seat, looked at her father for a long moment, and immediately noticed the folded apron resting on the dashboard. She did not ask questions right away. Nathan started the engine and drove toward home, through the quiet streets of Redwood Creek. After several minutes, Lily finally spoke in the gentle voice that reminded him so much of her mother. "Did you have a hard day today, Dad?" Nathan smiled, although it did not quite reach his eyes. "A little harder than most." Lily nodded as if that answer was enough for now. She reached into her backpack, pulled out a peanut butter cookie wrapped in a napkin, and placed it in his hand. "I saved this for you." Nathan laughed softly and thanked her before taking a bite. Sometimes children understood exactly what adults needed without hearing the whole story. 2 days later, after updating his resume and sending applications across Northern California, Nathan had received nothing except polite rejection emails and unanswered phone calls. Most companies wanted younger managers with specialized software experience or executives willing to relocate immediately. Nathan could not leave Redwood Creek. Lily had school friends and memories there. On Friday morning, while driving back from another disappointing interview, a weathered wooden sign caught his attention near the edge of town. "For sale, Old Mill Bakery." He slowed the truck almost without thinking. The building stood alone beneath 2 towering oak trees. The paint had faded years earlier. One window was covered with plywood. Wildflowers pushed through cracks in the sidewalk. Most drivers would have kept going. Nathan parked instead. The realtor arrived 15 minutes later carrying a ring of old brass keys. She apologized before unlocking the front door. "Most people leave after 5 minutes," she admitted. Nathan stepped inside without answering. Dust floated through narrow beams of sunlight. Empty display shelves leaned against one wall. The floor creaked beneath every step. Then he noticed something that made him stop completely. Behind a pair of swinging wooden doors stood a handcrafted Italian stone oven, its brickwork still perfectly intact despite years of neglect. He walked closer and gently rested one hand against the cool stone surface. His expression changed. This was not ordinary equipment. Very few independent bakeries in California still owned ovens built like this. The realtor watched him curiously. "Everyone says the place is too old to save," she said. Nathan continued studying the oven without looking away. Then he quietly asked the first question anyone had asked about the property in almost 3 years. "Does everything inside come with the building?" The realtor nodded slowly. "Everything stays. The equipment. The shelves. The handwritten recipe books, if anyone still wants them." Nathan walked deeper into the bakery, while dust settled behind every step. Against the back wall stood a tall wooden cabinet with flour bins built into the frame. Beside it rested a marble worktable worn smooth by decades of careful hands. Nothing inside looked modern. Everything inside looked built to last. He opened one drawer after another, until he discovered a thick leather notebook tied with faded red string. The first page carried a simple sentence written in careful handwriting. "Good bread earns trust before it earns money." Nathan closed the notebook without another word. He already understood the person who had written it. The asking price was lower than a small condominium in Redwood Creek. But it was still more money than Nathan had available. Nearly all of his savings had been set aside for Lily's future and unexpected emergencies. Buying the bakery would mean risking almost everything he had left. That evening they sat together in their small apartment eating grilled cheese sandwiches at the kitchen table. Lily noticed the folded brochure beside his plate. "Is that the bakery you stopped to look at?" Nathan smiled. "It is." She studied the picture for a few seconds. It looks lonely. Nathan laughed quietly. I think it does too. Lily tilted her head. Do you think it misses making bread? He looked at his daughter, surprised by the question. Maybe it does. She reached across the table and placed her small hand over his. Then maybe we should help it. The following Monday, Nathan met with the local bank. The loan officer reviewed his application, his employment history, and the purchase agreement before folding her hands together. Your experience is impressive, Miss Brooks, but you do not currently have a job, and independent bakeries have a high failure rate. I cannot approve this request today. Nathan thanked her for the meeting, gathered his paperwork, and walked outside without arguing. The afternoon breeze carried the smell of the ocean across the parking lot as he stood beside his old pickup wondering what came next. Most people would have driven home. Nathan turned the key in the ignition and headed back toward the abandoned bakery instead. He unlocked the front door with the temporary inspection key, walked directly to the stone oven, and rested his hand against the brick once again. This time, he noticed a faded metal plate fastened near the base. It listed the manufacturer in northern Italy and the installation year. 1968. Nathan looked at the number for a long moment. Then a quiet smile appeared across his face. He had just realized that the oven alone was worth more than the entire asking price of the building. Nathan spent the next 3 days making phone calls that most people would have considered impossible. He contacted a restoration specialist in Sacramento, who confirmed the serial number stamped into the oven matched one of the last handcrafted commercial stone oven ovens imported during the late 1960s. He called a retired bakery equipment dealer in San Jose who laughed when Nathan asked about replacing it. Replace it. If that oven still works, you do not replace it. You build your business around it. Nathan thanked him, wrote careful notes inside a small notebook, and drove home before Lily finished school. That evening they returned to the old bakery carrying 2 folding chairs, a flashlight, and sandwiches wrapped in brown paper. Lily wandered slowly through the empty shop, her footsteps echoing across the wooden floor. She stopped beside the dusty front window and stretched her arms wide. This is where people will smile when they buy bread. Nathan looked at the faded walls and imagined fresh paint, warm lights, and shelves filled before sunrise. For the first time since losing his job, the future no longer felt empty. It felt unfinished. The next morning he met the property owner, an elderly man named Harold Dawson, who had inherited the building from his older brother. Harold admitted that developers had approached him several times, hoping to tear the bakery down and replace it with another retail space. Nathan did not ask for a lower price. Instead, he spoke about the oven, the history of the building, and the families who had once gathered there every Saturday morning. Harold listened without interrupting. When Nathan finally stopped speaking, the older man smiled quietly. You are the first person who talked about the bakery, instead of the land beneath it. He reached into his briefcase, removed the purchase contract, and crossed out the original down payment requirement. You can pay the rest over time. Just promise me one thing. Bake real bread again. Nathan looked at the revised agreement for several silent seconds before accepting the pen. He signed his name with a steady hand. Outside, Lily clapped the moment she saw her father walk through the front door holding a ring of old brass keys. She threw her arms around him and laughed so loudly that passing strangers turned to look. Nathan unlocked the weathered front door once again, this time as its owner. Dust still covered every shelf. The windows still needed replacing. The walls still carried years of neglect. None of that mattered anymore. Hidden beneath decades of silence was everything they needed to begin again. Nathan stepped into the bakery, switched on the single working light above the kitchen, and noticed another narrow wooden door at the back of the building that neither he nor the realtor had opened before. The narrow wooden door opened with a long creak that echoed through the empty bakery. Nathan lifted the flashlight and stepped inside, while Lily stayed close behind him. The small room had not been touched in years. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined every wall, covered with flour dust that had settled like snow over forgotten boxes. Brass measuring tools, and stacks of handwritten order books. Near the back stood a tall oak cabinet secured with an old iron latch. Nathan carefully opened it and paused. Inside were dozens of leather-bound recipe journals arranged by year, each one labeled in neat handwriting dating back more than 4 decades. Beneath them rested customer ledgers, holiday production schedules, and letters from families thanking the previous owner for wedding cakes, birthday bread, and Thanksgiving rolls that had become part of their traditions. Lily picked up one of the letters and smiled as she slowly read the final sentence aloud. "Thank you for feeding our family for 30 years. Nathan gently placed the letter back where it belonged. This bakery had never been just another business. It had once been part of the community itself. Over the next several weeks their days settled into a simple rhythm. Nathan repaired cracked shelves, polished the marble worktable, restored the display cases, and cleaned every brick of the old Italian oven by hand. Lily swept the front room after school, arranged empty baskets on the shelves, and painted a small wooden sign, with careful blue letters, that simply read "Fresh" every morning. They could not afford expensive renovations, so they relied on patience instead. Every improvement came from steady work rather than large budgets. One Saturday afternoon an elderly woman stopped outside while Nathan was repainting the front window. She studied the building for several quiet moments before walking closer. "I used to buy cinnamon bread here every Sunday with my husband," she said softly. "I thought this place was gone forever." Nathan smiled and invited her inside even though the bakery had not opened yet. She looked around slowly, her eyes stopping when she recognized the old stone oven. Tears gathered before she quietly thanked him for saving something she believed the town had already lost. Word spread faster than Nathan expected. Neighbors began dropping by with stories, old photographs, and memories connected to the bakery. Some offered spare chairs. Others donated vintage bread baskets they had stored in garages for years. Nobody invested money. They invested trust. One evening, after locking the front door, Nathan opened the oldest recipe journal and noticed a folded envelope tucked between 2 worn pages. Across the front, written in careful black ink, were just 7 words. "Open only when the bakery belongs to you again." Nathan unfolded the envelope with both hands, careful not to tear the brittle paper. The letter inside had been written by the bakery's original owner nearly 20 years earlier. It was not a legal document. It was not a list of recipes. It was a promise. "If you are reading this, it means you chose this place for the same reason I did. Not because it was the easiest way to make money. Because you believed people deserved honest bread made by honest hands." Nathan finished the final line and quietly folded the letter again. He placed it back inside the notebook exactly where he had found it. The following Monday, before sunrise, the ovens burned for the first official opening day. Butter melted across warm dough. Fresh sourdough cooled beside rows of cinnamon rolls. Lily arranged handwritten price cards, while humming softly to herself. At exactly 7 o'clock they unlocked the front door. Their first customer was the elderly woman who had visited during the renovations. She bought 1 sourdough loaf and 2 cinnamon rolls. She took a bite before reaching her car, smiled, turned around, and walked back inside. "This tastes exactly the way I remember," she said. Before noon every loaf had sold out. The next morning even more customers arrived. By the end of the first week people were waiting outside before the lights came on. Someone posted a short video online showing Nathan pulling steaming artisan bread from the restored Italian oven while Lily greeted every customer by name. The video spread across California much faster than anyone expected. Food bloggers praised the bakery for preserving traditional methods. Local newspapers called it the town's unexpected comeback story. Within 3 weeks, wholesale requests began arriving from cafes, restaurants, and specialty grocery stores throughout Northern California. Nathan politely declined most of them. He refused to grow faster than quality allowed. Across the bay, quarterly sales reports landed on Claire Whitmore's conference table with numbers that immediately caught her attention. Whitmore Foods had lost market share in premium artisan bread for the first time in years. Marketing teams blamed changing customer preferences. Sales managers blamed new competitors. Claire requested samples from every bakery, attracting unusual attention. Late that afternoon, a simple white bakery box was placed on the conference table. There was no expensive branding, no glossy advertising, only a small blue sticker that read "Fresh every morning." Claire broke off a piece of sourdough, tasted it, and stopped speaking in the middle of the meeting. She recognized the balance immediately, the texture, the natural fermentation. The signature she had dismissed 3 months earlier, without ever realizing it. She looked at the label once more, reached for her phone, and quietly instructed her assistant to clear the following morning. She was going to visit the bakery herself. The black SUV stopped in front of the bakery at exactly 8:14 in the morning. Claire Whitmore stepped onto the sidewalk and paused before opening the door. The line of customers stretched halfway down Maple Avenue. Nobody recognized the chief executive officer standing among them. They were too busy talking about the warm sourdough that had already sold out twice that week. Claire quietly waited her turn. When she finally stepped inside, the familiar aroma reached her before the familiar face did. Nathan Brooks lifted a tray of golden bread from the restored Italian oven and turned toward the front counter. Their eyes met exactly as they had 3 months earlier, but everything else had changed. Nathan no longer wore a company apron. Claire no longer carried the certainty that every decision she made was correct. For several long seconds neither of them spoke. Then Lily looked up from the coloring book beside the register and smiled politely. "Dad, is she here for bread too?" Nathan returned the tray to the cooling rack and nodded once. "Good morning, Claire." She managed a small smile that carried more humility than confidence. "Good morning, Nathan. I owe you an apology." The customers continued chatting softly around them, while fresh bread cooled on wooden racks. Nobody realized they were watching two lives quietly change direction. Claire looked around the bakery, noticing the restored shelves, the polished marble worktable, the handwritten signs, and the photographs local families had donated for the walls. "It feels different here," she said. Nathan glanced toward Lily before answering. "It feels like home." Claire lowered her eyes for a moment. "I came here planning to make an offer. I thought I could buy this place. Now I understand that some things cannot be purchased." She took a slow breath. "I judged you before I understood your work. I saw a delayed production line. I never saw the person who built it." Nathan remained silent for a moment before speaking. "Bread teaches patience. If you rush the process, you ruin the result. People are not very different." Claire nodded quietly. She reached into her bag, removed a folder, and placed it on the counter without opening it. Inside was not a purchase agreement. It was a formal invitation asking Nathan to serve as an independent consultant to help Whitmore Foods rebuild its artisan division on his own terms. Nathan looked at the folder but did not touch it. "Maybe someday," he said with a gentle smile. "Right now my daughter still expects me to be here every morning." Lily proudly placed a fresh loaf into a paper bag and handed it to Claire. "This one just came out of the oven," she said. Claire accepted it with both hands. "Thank you." As she stepped back onto Maple Avenue, she looked once more through the front window. Nathan was already helping another customer. Lily was laughing beside him. The bakery was full of warmth, conversation, and the quiet confidence that comes from honest work. Claire realized she had not truly lost an employee 3 months earlier. She had walked away from the finest baker she had ever known. Nathan watched the morning sunlight spill across the wooden floor, then opened the bakery door for the next customer, with the same calm smile he had carried all along. Sometimes the greatest success is not proving someone wrong. It is building a life so meaningful that the people who once overlooked you finally understand what they failed to see.